Welcome to Publishing Power. My name is JoEllen, and I am here today again with Hayley Milliman from ProWritingAid. Hello, Hayley. How are you today?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I am doing great. I am so glad we're doing this series. This is so much fun. We've covered readability and clarity, and today we're going to talk about showing and telling in our writing. So I'm going to let you go into that in just a minute, but it's really good. Hayley comes to us from ProWriting Aid, which we love and partner with so much because they have a fantastic online platform that helps you to become a better writer, and they teach you so much. It's not just improving your work, but you really get to learn, and it's fantastic. It's a grammar guru, a style editor, and of course, it's just a copywriting all in one package. It's kind of like a writing mentor there. So they have reports and different tools that we use every day with all of our editors as professional editors to make sure that we're not missing anything in your work. And therefore, I encourage everyone to do this work themselves and also to become a better self-editor so that you can improve your writing and master your skills. So again, thank you for joining us, Hayley. This is fantastic. Yes. Show, don't tell. Tell us, what does that mean? And what does that mean?
Yeah, great. Good question. Great place to start. So show, don't tell basically means that you are letting your reader do a little bit more work, more of the heavy lifting. So instead of saying, Hayley is sad. Hayley is sad is a great example of telling. I'm telling you, I am sad. It's very boring. It's kind of quick to the point. It doesn't really create an engaging reading experience. No. That is telling. Our goal is always to show. So instead of saying Hayley is sad, I'm using language to show that I'm sad. So I might say Hayley's lower lip trembled, a tear rolled down her cheek. So as the reader, you are then able to tell or to make an assumption, right, that Hayley is sad, but it's not just forced down your throat. It's not just told. And it's really creating just this more kind of vivid experience. And if you're not, when you're kind of focusing just on like, Hayley is sad, Hayley was hungry, Hayley is, goes to the store. Again, it's kind of creating those like simple experiences where your reader really just isn't getting to engage or do any kind of do any kind of heavy lifting at that point, because they're just like, oh yeah, I get it. I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this comes back to, who are you talking to? Who is your audience? Who are you writing for? And I know that before you've mentioned a couple of ideas of like your words are creating a movie in our minds for each of them to see. Yes. So, who is the one who's going to watch your movie and why, and what do they want from the story that you have to tell? Because the story, basically has an event and a conflict and a resolution, but the journey is why we've decided to join you. So I think that's really good. Yeah. So how do we show and don't tell? How does it affect the reader experience exactly? If we're thinking about the reader, the person, our audience.
That's a great question. So I think I kind of started to hint at it. Basically, typically when you're telling, you're using less evocative language. So if I'm saying something like, again, Hayley is sad, I'm creating a less evocative, like a less engaging experience for my reader. So my goal will always be to try to create something where the reader really feels immersed. And like you said, obviously, that what that is changes depending on who you're writing for. So if I'm writing for a 5-year-old, or like kindergarten, Hayley is sad might be perfectly fine because that's like about as evocative as they can handle. But when you're writing for adults, you really want to use language in a way that kind of drops them into this scene and lets them do some of the heavy lifting and interpreting on their own too, right? So sometimes this comes in often with description and that type of thing. It comes in with dialogue as well too. We see this a lot in ProWriting Aid, where people tend to use dialogue tags to kind of like tell how a character is feeling. So saying like, Hayley, Hayley shouted, or Hayley using those kind of like exceptional dialogue tags that convey meaning rather than like having the meaning be in what the person is saying, right? So when you're thinking about showing, you want to think about, how can I use the language of my dialogue, of my description to show what I mean rather than telling the reader what I mean. So instead of saying like Hayley fumed at her mother, like, or something like that, or like put your dishes away, Hayley's mother fumed, like you should make the dialogue itself show that my mom is mad at me, right? So you're always trying to think about how can I construct these sentences in a way that I don't have to tell the reader what I mean, but the reader can kind of infer what I mean by the way that I'm using language. And we've talked in previous sessions about kind of clarity, right? So the goal here isn't to like obfuscate the meaning or to make it really like a puzzle piece, but rather to like engage the reader. So you're not trying to hide it or again, use complicated language here, but you are trying to use evocative language. So you're always kind of threading that line between how can I be as descriptive as possible without being overly complicated. So again, the goal in showing is not to just be super, super complicated and like make your reader puzzle it through, but rather to make your reader feel, right? So we don't want to read, like we're always treading that line of like, how can my reader be engaged? How can my reader feel something? And how can I also not make my reader have to have like a dictionary by their side to try to understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if we're going to do this and we're going to, are we using more tools? Are we using, synonyms, thesaurus? How are we achieving this show, don't tell? If we go back and we look, obviously we're going to look at our writing and we say, okay, well, I'm going to subject, verb, object, not so complicated here, move it around.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. So the first way is looking for like to be verbs. So like, is this, was this? That's usually a good flag that you've used an emotion tell. So you've just said, Hayley is this. So that's a good way. Obviously, some of these are fine, right? You don't always have to, like, it doesn't mean that every single time someone's sad, you have to like write the soliloquy about, how they feel and that type of thing. But again, you want to look and see, all right, am I using this too much? Could I describe this in a way that's more engaging? So to be verbs are a good way to tell. Another way is using what I call the camera test. So the camera test is asking yourself kind of, if I looked at this, if I had a movie camera, or if I took a camera or I took a photo of this scene as I described it with a camera, would it capture all the details that I need to create that vivid picture? So again, if you go back to the Hayley is sad example, if I just said on the page, Hayley is sad sitting at her desk, that's not really like a camera couldn't pick up on what sad is, right? Like the camera will pick up on more examples. Like you need to kind of flesh out sad, right? Sad is not something a camera can see, but a camera could see tears, right? A camera could see a trembling lower lip. A camera could see downcast eyes. A camera could see a pale complexion, right? So typically those is verbs need more description for a camera to pick it up. So think about that. Like, if I were to have a movie, playing of this, or if I were to use a camera, would it pick up all the details that I, as the author, am thinking in my head? Or, if it doesn't, then I need to kind of add some more in, right? Especially when they matter. So it might not matter that my lower lip is trembling in a particular scene, but you want to think about that. Like, where does it matter that the camera picks up small details? And again, where can those kind of small details come into to add more engagement to my reader experience? The same goes for setting too, right? So if you're just describing, like Arendelle was beautiful, like what does beautiful means? A million things, So like just telling your reader that a specific place is beautiful doesn't do anything. You have to give more description about what made it beautiful. I might think something in the mountains is beautiful and you might think something by the sea is beautiful, and so like you have to add those details. And again, think about that camera. Could the camera pick up the way the cobblestone streets, glistened in the sun? And, could the camera pick up the way the, castle's turrets reach towards the sky or something like that? And that's what you're thinking. Like in my scenes, is the camera picking up all these small details that I, as the writer, have thought about, and if you're saying, oh no, actually, like this isn't on the page, I need to add that back in. So camera test is really big. And that's going to be something that you do when you're rereading, right? When you're rereading a scene, when you're rereading your book, thinking again, could this camera kind of pick up all of the small details? If my book is adapted by a director, will it be true to my vision? Or will they go like wildly off because I haven't given enough details? And then, ProWriting Aid can help as well. So we have in our style report and in our sensory report ways to kind of pick up these emotion tells. So it can pick up again, places where you're using those to be verbs and just saying felt sad, felt scared, felt whatever. And it can flag those for you and let you know how, oops, I've done that. Maybe I should change it. And then we also have a sensory report, which tells you kind of which language using to like the 5 senses. So taste, smell, etc. How much language are related to each of those you've used. Because typically if you're not using sensory words too often, then you're likely telling and not showing. When you really kind of add in those words about how things taste and what they look like and what the sounds are like, it's going to be on the whole more showing than telling.
Right. I think this is really great. One of the things I like to mention here is that the reports and ProWritingAid plugs in with another one of my favorite tools, which is Fictionary, Storyteller, and Story Coach. And that really, we've covered, if you've watched our podcast here, we have the other 38 story elements. And it does go into the scene, the location, the characters, and, the senses. And it really, one of the great things is when you have a checklist, you don't omit anything. So by using these tools, which we use as your editors, then you're learning not only how to not miss anything, but you're learning to naturally think about these things all the time. And prolific writers, especially independent fiction writers, they do tend to, write the next in a series to plan this out. And I think it's really great. And I love how these two tools actually they work together, and then you just, we don't have to plug them together. They're all automatically already playing together very well, but to look at the scenes and to make sure, are you using not just, to see things, but sometimes you want to taste it. Sometimes you want to feel it. There's different things so that you're using all the senses from all the different angles. Are you using the weather? How does that affect you? And did the weather do anything to help you? And does it set a mood? You're sad, but was the tear hidden in the water running down her face? And so then, it's a little bit less likely for the other character in the scene. So I really think that those are great. So again, I love talking about how to get all those things in, because there are a lot of tools out there, but it's not easy to know which ones to use. And this is really, really good. And reports are so helpful for.
Yeah. And like a lot of times as writers, we have these scenes like in our head, right? Like when we're planning something, we're visualizing it and we know it, right? Like we have it, but the act of writing is so hard, right? Like the act of writing is exhausting. It's super hard. So when you're doing it, you probably did have a very clear picture of like what was happening, what the weather was like, what was going on, but it doesn't always make it onto the page. And again, where these tools can come in and help you and just make sure like, hey, it's like that kind of little nudge, like, hey, Hayley, like you had this great idea, but it didn't quite make it here because you were probably really tired when you were writing the scene. So you've done a lot of telling. It's like that nudge of like, hey, remember that scene, the scene that you meticulously planned and you spent hours thinking about? Like, you're not doing a great job of like conveying the meaning and conveying what's going on. You should really take a look at this again and try to add some of those sentences back in, because writing's tiring. And I think it's really hard for a lot of us to try to get all these, to get like what's locked in our heads onto the page.
Well, and it takes time. It's having, I guess, that intelligent assistant and writing mentor right there, kind of just nudging you the entire time, because it's really hard. And I want to mention that in today's world, if your objective is to become a best-selling author or to have a mass audience to read, there's millions, literally millions of people sitting right now at their computers also with that same objective. So you need to have a very defined purpose. You need to plan. You need to use all the tools available that can help you improve and get better, because it's more than just the actual sitting down and doing your time. It's actually achieving your goals. So I really do like that. So show, don't tell. So we need to go back and look at all our sentences, I'm guessing. Is there anything?
I mean, for show, don't tell, you're looking again, like sentence level at those kind of to be verbs, but you do also want to look on the larger level for show, don't tell for scenes, right? So show, don't tell is looking, you make those changes at the sentence level, but you want to be reading a total kind of scene one by one, because like I said, some to be verbs are fine. Some just telling is fine, but you want to think about that camera test. Like think about, is this capturing the entire scene in the way that I would want it to. And for that, you do need to zoom out a little bit. So you've started with your sentences to make sure you're not using too many excessive to be verbs, but then you do want to look at the larger level and see, does this whole thing flow? Am I capturing it in a way that would translate well to a photograph, to film, you know, whatever. And not saying that your book has to go that way, but just that, like, you know, your reader wants to play. And we talked about this a couple sessions ago, that movie that your reader is playing in their head. Is it clear, right? Is it capturing? Is there a chance your reader could think that your setting is by the beach instead of in the mountains where it actually is? Like, you want to make sure that it's very clear, very engaging, and very evocative for them.
Right. Anchor your scene from the very beginning. Make sure it's contacting all the senses there. Fantastic. Thank you, Hayley. Again, we keep hammering again and again, but it takes a little time. And I do think that people appreciate just that little golden nugget of, okay, what can I walk away and do today? Because you apply these over time and they really do make a huge difference in your writing and your skills there. So again, we appreciate you coming in to talk about how people can better self-edit. And we look forward to working again in the future. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye-bye.